everyone, welcome to Biblio.com, used and rare marketplace featuring over 100 million used, rare, and out-of-print books. In celebration of our Biblio Live virtual book fairs, we are continuing a series featuring book collectors and their collections. Today we're chatting with Robert Priddle, writer, lecturer, private librarian, and collections curator. Most notable is his extensive personal collection of witchcraft materials, the largest in Ontario. He's also published work on the Hellfire Book Club, the origins of modern occultism and the cunning traditions during the transitional period of English magic, and the formation of a global view of Western esotericism. Robert, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you. I've never heard my life summed up so succinctly before. Thank you.
So you've got a very interesting niche and collection that you do. Can you tell us a story of how you ended up concentrating on this subject matter as a collector?
So I've always been a magical sort of a kid. Before even Harry Potter ever came onto the scene back in the 1980s, I remember in my elementary school library there was a book of spells, and I just loved it. And so I've always been fascinated by religion and magic. And then throughout my career as an academic, I focused on that. And I started a master's degree of arts in religious studies at the University of Ottawa, where I was focusing on magic in the classical period, but I'm terrible at Greek and Latin. So I started focusing something on England during the late 19th century, or late 18th century, early 19th century. And from there, I realized I didn't know enough about book production. And I took another master's degree at the University of Toronto in information, focusing on rare books and things like that. So I ended up producing a work analyzing the transition of English magic, as you mentioned, in Francis Barrett's The Magus, 1801. During this time, it was my mentor, Lucy Dufresne. She passed away shortly after I finished my graduate degrees, and she bequeathed to me a great deal of her collection, most of it which is behind me right here, women's studies, religious studies, and a great deal of magic. We'll probably talk a little bit later about some of the specifics of that as well. And then it just augmented my already burgeoning collection of magical books and things like that. And I also focus on gardening and horticulture, rare books like that. So it's a very green witch sort of library that I have going here.
Yeah, see, there's a Venn diagram that overlaps pretty heavily on those two, isn't there?
Yeah, it's a circle.
Obviously, you're a private librarian and you curate book collections for others. Can you talk a little bit about that and the discovery and curation?
I deal mostly with people's estates or going into people's houses and giving them assessments of their collection, because I don't fancy myself a rare book dealer. The books that I buy, they're mine, but they're part of a larger sort of resource strategy that I'm making, because I get emails and questions from all over the world about particular magical questions. And so it's important for me to have a working library that I can draw on. And in addition to that, I also have a pagan archive from Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto. So I have all of those things. So my goal is to be a resource center rather than being a dealer. So as a private librarian, it enables me then to find books for people that they're desiring, because that's what librarians do. But if I do it in a private way, this way I can make a little bit more money than I could in the public sector. Because let me tell you, a public librarian is a hard row.
Absolutely.
So that's mostly what I've ended up doing. A few weeks ago, I was at an estate sale in Hudson, Quebec, and this woman's house was filled with books, gardening books, cooking books, all kinds of stuff. I go through and I select out all the books of magic that are mine, feng shui and things like that. And then I fill up my car and I drive it to a used bookstore, and I help a used bookstore keep on replenishing her collection and work with them that way. But yeah, the private librarian, mostly what I end up doing is just telling people not to smoke in their houses.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a real quick way of getting your collection filled with nicotine.
And there's no way to get the discoloration off of the papers. With a lot of work and dedication, you can maybe budge that smell, but yeah, don't smoke in your library.
Yeah, and generally when it comes to smells, books that are coming from witches, they usually smell of incense.
So with curating book collections for others, are those usually within your niche, or is it just because you're out and having your fingers in people's estates and seeing things that you know people might want, or do people specifically come to you for your theme?
People do come to me for my theme. They are asking to buy books of magic. They are not for sale. They will never be for sale. They are all mine, and they will be until the end of time. But I do, like I said, I do enjoy when people coming to, if I see books that other people are within their collection scope, because it also branches into antiques as well. Rare books and antiques sort of are a hand in hand kind of a thing. If I see something that someone likes at an estate sale or a rare auction, I show them out to my clients, and then they say yes or no, and we work from there. And my motto is trying to find the best edition for the best price.
We've joked at Biblio that some of the only differences between a collector and a bookseller is that someone found a better copy of something and is ready to get rid of the one that they had, and bit by bit, next thing you know, they've got a shop and
Yeah, or as Robertson Davies said, a book collector is to combine the worst traits of both a drug fiend and a misanthrope.
that's a good one.
Yeah.
So, what are a few of your favorite pieces from your library?
So I have a lot of favorites, obviously, because a library is representative of one's personal tastes and also furniture, right? Like they're back in the early modern period, cunning folk would display books of magic as a means to impress their clientele. They weren't necessarily for reading, but they were there to display. And so I do display a lot of them. I have a few things that I want to show you. So I just picked up at the Montreal Rare Book Fair, The Warlock's Book by Peter Haining. And so it's a rather sexy little book of sex magic and drugs and stuff like that. Love that kind of stuff. The Practice of Magical Evocation by Franz Barden. That set me back about $200. And then, sort of cheaper volumes, just generally covering magic and religion and things like that. But I also love anything to do with gardening and horticulture, because I live out in the country. I have 3 acres of land, and I sort of live by Cicero's motto: if you have a library and a garden, you will desire nothing. I picked this up from the UK. This is The Complete Gardener from 1649, and this was written by the man who designed the gardens of Versailles.
Wow.
I have a lot of herbals and botany books and things like that, but the best thing that I have, the best thing, this was given to me by my mentor. This is the manuscript of Starhawk's The Spiral Dance. It even has her original name on here. Starhawk, Miriam Simos, 129 Carl Street, San Francisco, California. And this is from the 1970s. And it's called New Moon Rising, A Manual of Magic and Earth Religion. And this was to become the Spiral Dance. And it was given to me by my mentor, who passed away in 2015.
Wow, that's really something. I know that when I first started delving into wanting to learn more about neo-paganism, modern versions of old religions, that's one of the first books people suggested that I encounter. So it's really something to have the manuscript of that. And the 70s were such a big time for growth in authors, I guess, really branching out, coming out in the US. And and then with the rise of Llewellyn and things like that, as a publishing house, just greater and greater access to those materials.
I have a plan sort of for this manuscript, because the Spiral Dance has been through, I think, maybe 30 editions so far, and since its time. And at some point, I would love to do a definitive critical edition based on that manuscript, doing an annotated copy of it at some point. Whether or not Miss Simos would like to be involved in that project or not, I don't know. But as someone who studies books of magic and who is a librarian, this is something that I think would be really useful for a lot of practitioners, because I talk with a lot of other people who write books of magic, and I give them advice, because I guess I'm sort of the expert on textbooks of magic, because Francis Barrett's The Magus was literally a textbook to how to study magic. And sometimes I get good responses from people, and other times not so good responses. I like to figure out how I can fit myself into continuing providing good access to these materials, which is, generally very, very rare and hard to come by. Collecting books of magic is not just rare, it's exceedingly rare. This is the people who tend to buy these books tend to be very wealthy individuals.
And hold on to them like a dragon with the hoard.
Yes, this I've called this space here my book hoard, my book hoard, right? And I love it.
Do you have any Tips for new collectors who haven't had quite the resources you have in being able to find and acquire these things, someone looking out to start their own hoard.
I do. So one is using websites like yours, Biblio.com. I use Biblio often, as well as Via Libri, which does the whole aggregates of all of those, and Rare Book Hub and things like that to help people find books. And that's the first place you should do. Do your research. The second thing is you need to take into account that books are they're your friends, but they live a lot longer than we do. So they will eventually find other friends to live with. That's okay. So you get to enjoy them for the time that you have them with, but you don't get to enjoy them forever. And so it's important that you keep them in good shape as best you can. But also don't be too worried about if your books are destroyed or you do write in them and eat them up. I do recommend to people to write in the margins of their books because it's the only way that we know that a reader actually engaged with it. But I get some really snappy responses though when I say, "Oh, write in your books." So
Yeah, that's as divisive as white gloves in the rare book world.
white gloves are only for metals. You don't need them for your
Yeah,
books. If they're meant to be used by the human hand.
that's right. That's right. Yeah, I love annotated books. My first book, I think, that I considered myself a collector is I found an 1874 copy of Goethe in the thrift store, just tucked into a trolley, nearly about to lose its cover. And I snatched that up so quick. And it was, the owner's inscription inside and a couple notes here and there throughout. And it just made it all that more exciting to me. I immediately went and, with the limited internet of that time, looked up who that person was, and they were an important figure during their time in my hometown. So, it's just one journey leads to another with
Precisely.
like this.
Sometimes buying books isn't necessarily about the book at all. It's about who owned the book. I have, well, right above here, this here, you might be able to recognize this book plate.
Not afraid not.
Henry Buxton Foreman. He was the forger. He was the editor for Shelley. That book actually was given to me for free, and I really love a book with like a really an interesting backstory. The book itself is really unremarkable, but owning something that someone else has infamously owned is kind of it's a bit of connection to the past that you really don't get from reading an ebook.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. I see you have classes and such on your site, but are you open to new clients seeking you out for curation, or is that more of a small side thing?
Well, so I love questions. I basically I just put myself out there for questions, and most of the time my advice and my work is absolutely free. I do it absolutely free. When work actually has to be done, the cataloging of a collection or the repair of a book, these kinds of things, then that's where the money comes in. But I have absolutely no problems coming to your house, helping you find a book, telling you how to bring your books to market, all these things, because like that is without someone doing this work, the work will not get done.
Mhm.
And rare book dealers are interested in making money. Rare book collectors are interested in collecting books. I I like to sit in between these two areas. So sometimes I have dealers looking for things. Other times it's collectors looking for things. Is there a book that you have always wanted that you can't find?
I actually just found one recently. A Biblio want list served me, and it was Rowan Tree Red Thread. Um,
Oh, wow.
and I can't remember the author at the moment, but it was one that's been on my list since I heard the Fairport Convention song ages ago, I believe.
That's awesome. And how'd you find it? Just through Biblio or?
Yep, the Biblio want list, and I think it was a Scottish publication. It wasn't a huge print run, and it's tales of Scottish witchcraft with some kind of textbook things thrown in, but a little more from a
Beautiful.
folkloric perspective, of they did this and they did this instead of here's how you do this.
How do you mark your books as yours? Do you have a book plate? Do you sign them? How do you let someone know that this was once owned by you?
It's a matter I've put consideration into, but have not decided. I think I
Okay.
would like to design a book plate, but that has not happened yet.
Oh, well, let me show you my book plate. I had one designed. So this is the book plate that I've designed.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, I have this hat made. So these are 100% cotton cardstock. I paste them in. Don't glue things into your books. Paste them because at least it's water soluble and can be reversed. And this is how I mark the books that I own, and I put my values on them. And sometimes on the back, I'll write a little notation on where it comes from, and that so that way, if the book does ever leave my hands, and they will one day, someone somewhere can do some investigations.
A little clue to provenance. That's lovely.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you'd like to tell the audience today? If they want to follow you or learn more, where can they find you?
So I have a very rudimentary website, priddles.ca, but I've had more success actually on Udemy doing a lecture series on the foundations on the academic study of magic. I, in fact, had just recently applied for a PhD at the University of Amsterdam to study Western esotericism, but it's a very, very tight competition. They only take 2 people every 4 years. My project surrounds images of Western magic as it appears in Japanese animation. This project will never see the light of day. There's not many universities that are going to take on someone who wants to talk about cartoons. So that's fine. So you can find me on Udemy, The Foundations of the Study of Magic. It's a 12-part series. I have 11 of them up. I'm hoping to film 12 at some point. It all depends on when I have time and when the lighting is right in the room and all these kinds of things. You can also just search me on Facebook or Twitter. There's not very many RA Priddles, I assure you.
Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
I'll wrap up. Of course, you can find us at biblio.com on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and now YouTube. You'll be able to find this video there. And don't forget to sign up for updates on our virtual book fairs at Biblio Live. And if you ever change your mind and step further into dealer territory, you just let us know.
I will do so.
Thank you.
Thank you.